Today, I have the opportunity to introduce you to Chief Chad Hawkins, who is the chief of the Belmont Police Department. And here's the way I would like to begin this conversation today. I read a book recently by Dr. Bennett Amalu, who Will Smith played in a movie, about a surgeon who helped to bring CTE as a concussion protocol and ways to deal with it to the NFL's guiding body and people to let them know. He wrote a book that has a great title, and it's a title that I believe as well. It's Truth Doesn't Have a Side. And so we're talking across the spectrum of people involved in the current situation that we live in as Americans, but also everyday life. And so I want to introduce you to Chief Chad Hawkins, who is a friend of mine and also somebody that cares deeply about making sure that everyone is protected and righteousness is served. So, Chief, welcome to the point. Welcome to the conversation in particular. And so tell us kind of what's on your heart about where you are right now and where we're going, all that kind of stuff.
Pastor Hardee, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to be here. I think this
Yes,
very important conversations that need to be had in our country right now. We've been having these conversations for a while, as we'll get into later. But I think it's very important that our citizens, especially here in Belmont and Gaston County, understand the commitment that we have as a professional law enforcement agency to make things better for our community and overall to be a light for our country.
Yes, sir. So among the many things that you've done, you also have a specific attitude related to where we are in the midst of this crisis and protecting our house. Would you talk some about that?
Yes. So a lot of conversations happen about everything going on around the world.
Yes,
and
sir.
all of those things are very important, and we pay attention to it. But I like to look at Belmont to start with, because you've got to get your own house in order before you focus on someone else's house. And that's what we have been doing for a long time. We did not just start these conversations a week and a half or 2 weeks ago. These are conversations that I've been having for many years, and specifically since I came to Belmont in 2017. And we began these conversations and training and making sure that our officers are properly trained and properly equipped to hopefully prevent any of the things that's happened across our country and any of these deaths, unfortunate deaths that we have experienced that's brought light to, especially the Mr. Floyd incident.
So talk about how you feel about that incident.
We, as law enforcement officers, and I think I could speak for every one of them, we're disgusted by those actions. I don't know any other word. That may sound a little blunt, but we're disgusted by those actions. That's not who we are. That's not what we believe in. That's not what we train for. And we, every law enforcement officer that I have spoken with, we're all disgusted by it. It tarnishes all of our badges. And even though we were not there, we understand that nationwide, people see us as police. And when something like that happens with another police officer, then it tarnishes all of our badges. So it disgusts us.
So one of the things that I've really gathered from learning from you guys is that you're always focused on the what and not the who. It's not about what color you are or what color you're not, or what side of the tracks you live on, or which neighborhood you live in, or what you drive or what you don't drive. You're really focusing on the what's right and what's wrong according to the law.
Yes. So as Belmont Police Department, our mission is to protect and serve with dignity, fairness, and respect. We serve all people.
Yes, sir.
We don't just serve certain people. We serve everyone from all different economic statuses to races. So if you view it that way and treating everyone with dignity, fairness, and respect, you don't lose sight of what you're doing. And as far as the right and wrong of it, I feel like we police behaviors and not people, not individuals.
Yes. That's really impressive because you're focusing on the what or the issue, what the crime that's been committed, rather than who that is. I was impressed when talking with Captain Davis several weeks ago. He said, you know, if a drug dealer is murdered, I'm going to investigate that drug dealer's murder just like it was the mayor's murder, because it's about the what and not about the who. Let me ask you this. So this is something that you've been working on for a long time. Talk to us about some of your experience. I know you've been a police officer in Gastonia, and you're the chief of police in Cherryville, and helped to sharpen some things over there and stuff like that. Talk about your background, and then about some of the things that you've done proactively, that this didn't just start 2 weeks ago.
Okay, so I'm going to start just to give you a little bit of history about myself and how I actually got into law enforcement. I grew up as a child that grew up in a very economically stressed area. We were very poor, and I spent the majority of my childhood life on Sundays at a prison camp visiting family members.
Wow.
I had a lot of family that was in trouble. So we struggled, and I saw those things, and I had a lot of encounters with police officers, just seeing them in my neighborhood and around my house. And there was a police officer years ago, and he actually made a difference in my life. He took the time to talk to me and explain what they were doing. So that really had an impact on me. So in the 6th grade, and my mother recently passed away, but she had a paper that I wrote in 6th grade about wanting to be a police officer. And it's about making the difference. I wanted to be that police officer like that police officer was to me in my neighborhood that day. I wanted to show people that no matter where you're from or what life has thrown at you, you can become what you want to be. And I wanted to be a police officer so that I could help people. It didn't matter what race or where they lived or anything like that. I wanted to help people. So my heart is to help people. And I feel like throughout my career, I've invested majority of my career is teaching and in community services, and to make sure that police officers are properly trained. And as a sergeant at Gastonia Police Department years ago, I had that opportunity to start making some of those changes in the training and even the way we train police officers, new new recruits. So that was something that really made an impact on me, that I could change other people. And then I went on to be the chief of Cherryville Police Department after a lot of things they had going on there, and was able to make a difference there. And so that's what's important to me, is to be able to help people to change, and to, just because you're doing it doesn't mean it's the right way. We have to look at things from a lot of different angles and make sure that we're following best practices. So that's my job, is to make sure people are following best practices so that all people are served, just like I was as a child, even being homeless at one point in my childhood.
So one of the things that impressed me about what you've said in previous conversations is that the Belmont Police Department has earned a gold standard in such things as emotional intelligence training and racial intelligence and multi-diversity training, because you want the best for the people. You want the best for everyone, not specifically the officers, first of all. You definitely want that for them, but you want the people to have the best trained officers so that they can have the best law enforcement system. Talk some more about some of those things that you've instituted over the years and how they help.
Well, we first start off, you have to look at your hiring practices and make sure that you're hiring the most qualified candidates. And a lot of that has to do with not just, what's on paper. We really dig into our candidates, and we know a lot of them even prior to coming there. So it starts with your hiring practices, and then you have to immediately train them properly to get the best product out of them, because if we fail them in that initial training phase, they're going to fail our citizens.
Yes.
So we have a great focus on training after we focus on hiring the best candidate.
Excellent.
And so and then there's a lot of training. I'm not sure if that's what you want to talk about now or get into now.
Yeah, tell us about some of the stuff around emotional intelligence and racial sensitivity and things that people have to go through, and just how diligent that is, and what that means specifically.
Yeah. So the majority of our training is focused on, the first piece of it to me is when I watch police officers, and I even watched as a younger man, and still we all struggle with it today. What I see people that really fail, they cannot control their emotions. People become what I call emotionally hijacked. So
yeah, I've been there.
we've all been there at some point. And even a lot of really good people get themselves in bad situations because they can't control their emotions. So to me, as a police officer, if you can control your emotions, the other stuff starts to fall in place. So the number one training is we call it customer service and all those things. But it starts with emotional intelligence and leads up to other things. But the emotional intelligence is self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skills. And one of the things I talk to my officers about, even after they get this training initially, but even after the horrible death of Mr. Floyd, we brought all our officers in, and I said, if we're following our proper training, and I'm going to go through that with you just to set it up, if we're following our training, we should never be in that position.
Yes, sir.
Because if we have self-awareness, we look at ourselves, and then we have self-regulation to move ourselves back from that situation.
Yes, sir.
Our motivation is important, but then our empathy. And we talk about a person laying on the ground, just in this particular situation, for 8-9 minutes, saying they can't breathe. And we have training in BLET, basic law enforcement training, where we're on the ground and we have to be handcuffed behind our back as part of the training. And right. I asked them to remember how that felt.
Yes, sir.
And think about that for a long period. That's that empathy.
Yes, sir.
Or think about this. We look at things through other people's lens. That's the only way that we're going to be successful, if we have a heart and we look at things through other people's lens and put ourselves in those positions. Because if you view something a certain way, it's always going to be that way.
Right.
It's always going to be that way.
So you're teaching them to walk a mile in the other person's shoes.
Absolutely. And then, there's social skills involved in that. Well, then we follow that up with our racial intelligence training. And these are classes that I personally teach our staff myself. The racial intelligence, what that includes is a lot of de-escalation techniques. And again, looking at things through other people's lens, where people come from. Everyone does not believe what you do. Everyone does not see things the way you do. And so you have to step back and you have to think about things the way they may be thinking about them. And, if I'm approaching someone as a police officer, I may not be thinking I'm going to enforce the law, but if they've had that kind of experience, then, so you have to be aware that you have to have that good self-awareness. So when we go through those things, and then something that's really huge, and we have stickers on our police cars, or inside of our cars, on our computers, they're on most of our desks, on our computer screens. It's a traffic signal, and it says stop, think, and go.
Cool.
And that is something that we really instill in our officers, that if you stop, process everything, and then make a decision, you're going to obviously make a better decision.
Yes, sir.
So after that, and again, we're going through the process of what happened with Mr. Floyd as we're talking about it recently. And then we talk about if you are emotionally hijacked, people fight you, people hit you, people hurt you. That is a natural emotion to defend yourself and to be, react out of emotions. So that's where we have, if you see something, you say something. If Pastor Hardee is getting into a conversation that he doesn't need to be involved in, or he's saying something that he doesn't need to be, or he gets physical with someone, that's my job to what we call tap them out and say, hey, I got this from here, move over here, let me take care of this.
Cool.
And so if you're following that training, you should never be in one of those situations. Someone, even if this officer, for whatever reason, is put themselves in a bad situation, someone there should stop it.
Right.
You have a duty to stop that.
Yes. So I think the interesting thing about your biography is that you have empathy because you've had people that have been in trouble legally from the time you were a child. Absolutely. Then you learned to walk in those shoes, and that you wanted to make sure that you were going to be, for want of a better phrase, I'm going to be one of the good guys instead of one of the bad guys. And you've sought to make sure your staff understood that.
Yes, I had a choice to make. As a young kid, I could have let that, it can make me better or make me bitter. And I wanted to make me better because I thought if I'm bitter, I can't help other people.
Yes, sir.
And I've always had a heart to help other people. And, we also do a lot of the implicit bias training to make sure, again, that we see things the way other people do. And if I go to a house, I'll give you an example of the bias. If I go to a house 5 times, and all 5 times I've had an issue with an individual there.
Yes, sir.
What I've got in my mind at this point is when I go back for the 6th time, that person's still going to be a problem.
Right.
So I've already made my mind up that person is going to be a problem when they may not be. Right. Maybe they've had a change of heart. So that's what we look at to say, our bias comes in a lot of different ways. I've just used that as an example of I have a bias about how a person is going to act or respond when I deal with them. So I have to change that mindset to say maybe this time they're going to act differently. Maybe this time they're going to do something different.
Yes, sir.
In a positive way. So, but if you make up your mind on how an outcome is going to be, that's the only outcome you're going to get.
So, I mean, that's fascinating because you really are profiling somebody if you're doing that. You're saying that you're trying to turn a trigger in your own mind and the minds of your officers is you're going to tend to slot people into ways that typically people do, but you're professionally trained to back up, stop, think, and then go and treat every situation individually rather than like, oh, here's Charlie, he's messed up again, right?
Absolutely. So any time we're dealing with individuals, and sometimes we deal with individuals that act differently every time you deal with them.
Right.
But if you go into it with an open mind, we always have to practice officer safety. I've always had a saying is I expect the worst and hope for the best.
Yes.
I have another one. I treat every single person that you encounter like they're your mother and father, and be ready to step back and deal with it. Otherwise, if it doesn't turn out that way,
right.
And if you treat people that way, you'll come out a winner. And
right.
I've practiced that.
That's awesome.
My entire career. Not perfect. We are not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. We are human beings.
Right.
And that is something that I want people to understand is we want to do the right thing, but there is a human element there.
Yes, sir.
And mistakes are just that. Now, if there's malicious people, then officers, then we have great issues with that.
So here's a question that I want to pose and give you a moment to think about it. Because you wear blue and you wear stars, other people wear bars, other people wear there's sources of authority in your life.
Absolutely.
And so you have authority. So empathy has helped you to understand where people come from because you've dealt with personal situations that were hurtful or people that were affected by law enforcement by their own choices or in other different kinds of ways, even things that you've endured yourself. So now you're in a position of power and you're standing in front of your officers and you're teaching them about stewarding the power that you have. What are some of the things that you would say if this room was full of police officers about, all right, now you've done the training, now you're wearing the emblems of authority, you're wearing the color of authority. Here's what you should do with that authority, and here's what you should not do with that authority.
Well, a lot of it goes back to the emotional intelligence I was talking about earlier. But I tell everyone this. I've even told my own son this,
He's
a law
police
enforcement
officer. Yeah.
The badge is heavy. There's a great responsibility with that badge. And the only authority that you have is really what the people you're serving give you.
Yes, sir.
Your authority that you're entrusted through the government, through your sworn, the law enforcement agency you're sworn through. But that badge and that authority means nothing if the people you're serving do not give you the respect. And if you do not earn their respect to be able to put that authority into use.
Amen.
That's so the authority.
The badge is heavy.
The badge is heavy.
Amen.
And it comes with, the law of authority, but really as a community.
Yep.
If they do not trust us as law enforcement officers, our authority really doesn't mean a lot.
Right.
And I know that may not make a lot of sense, but if you process it, if our citizens rebel against us, there's not that many of us. There's a lot of citizens.
Right.
So you want them to have voluntary compliance because they respect you and they trust that you're going to do the right thing.
Trust is big. Absolutely.
And it is about trust.
And so when you do things like you did the march this past weekend and just so many good things came out of that, you're spending all of your time thinking more, not so much about who do we have to go get today, but what can we go give today to make the community better? And we've seen illustrations of that. So one of the things I think that a lot of people out there might be thinking is, well, what about all you guys are just a bunch of white guys? What if I'm a black young man or a black young woman or a Latino young man or a Latina young woman, and I want to explore a career in law enforcement? Something that has occurred to me recently in previous conversations, you said it's hard to convince somebody to come be part of a force if their mom and their dad and their grandparents and their aunts and uncles and their brothers and sisters have said, you're a devil. But what we need is more people that are people of color that can help to make the police force even more representative. Talk some about how somebody might become a law enforcement officer. There might be a child out there that's having the same kind of convictions you had when you were 6 years old, and maybe even they've had some family members that have been in prison. They're going like, there need to be good police officers out there, and maybe I want to be one of them because I sense that a police officer's calling is just as real and just as powerful as my calling to be a pastor or your calling to be a teacher or a salesperson or a businessman. So what would you say to those people that are like, I'm interested, but I feel like there's a lid on top, I can't do this? Or talk about some of the diversity in your department even as compared to the community.
So you bring up a lot of good points. And
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I'll try to address each one of those. But it starts, to me, with this here. If people trust us and you do not judge, and I'm going to speak for Belmont because I am the Belmont Police Chief, and I am responsible and accountable to the citizens of Belmont.
And I think it's fair to say you're not responsible for the rest of the world. You can be identified with them because you wear blue, but you're protecting this house where you have maximal control.
I have no control of training, policies, procedures, any of those things with any other agency across this country.
Yes, sir.
I am responsible for the City of Belmont Police Department. So therefore, I can make sure that we have the proper policies, we have the proper training. As I told you earlier, we're in the final stages of being nationally accredited with CLIA accreditation, which means we follow the best practices laid out. We follow the 21st century policing that the President Obama's task force laid out, best practices. We meet or exceed every one of those 6 pillars that's discussed in that. That is extremely important to us. And I'm saying all that to tie it into this. If we set a good example for our community, then that's how we should be judged. When you see a police officer and when you're with your child or a family member, we just ask that you judge us based on your interaction and your knowledge of us and how we do things, not based on how you see things all across the country.
Right.
And if that happens, we will have more diversity in law enforcement agencies, because I've had a lot of discussions and I've had people tell me, I've told my family members I don't want them to be a police officer because y'all are all crooked and y'all are all racist and that's hurtful because we do things differently at our police department. Again, we're not perfect, but we have a lot of accountability. We have things in place to prevent those, or at least to we have early intervention to catch things like that. So if we can get the message out there, we can have good relationships with the community, and we can be judged based on what we do. A conversation you and I were having before it started, we had 40-something thousand calls for service last year.
40-something thousand.
And we had 2 use of forces.
So only twice you had to get rough with somebody.
Yes, and,
wow.
and those were not complaints externally. Those were just use of forces. We investigate every single complaint. We investigate every single use of force. That goes back to the transparency, the trust in our community, because our community needs to know, not only as the chief is sitting here telling you this, but this is backed up by the actual investigations, the numbers, the reporting that we do, because that's critical. That's the whole transparency. But all that ties into if our community can trust us based on what we do as a community, hold me as the chief of police in Belmont accountable.
Right.
And then base your decisions on that.
Yes, sir.
Base your decisions about telling your children, telling your grandchildren that they need to be police officers based on us. And we would love to. We have a lot of diversity in our organization. We are probably one of the most diverse agencies around. We were comparing numbers from our stats from the city, from our census, and to our staff at Belmont Police Department. We're a very diverse organization, and that is something that.
So what you're saying is that in comparison with the general population, you have, I believe, 2.5 times as many people that are minorities that are even in the general population of this area.
Yes, when you look at our numbers and compare them, our diversity is very much in line with our community and even exceeds that. Excellent. As far as so that is something we really work hard at. But a lot of the officers that come to us, they come to us because we have a reputation of doing the right thing, and not we have great law enforcement agencies around here. There's nothing about that, but I feel like we have a good culture, and I think culture is important. When people know that your organization supports you, but they also hold you accountable. And that is a big word in our organization, is accountability.
Right.
Accountability.
Right.
If you are right, we will stand behind you. If you are wrong, we will hold you accountable and handle that accordingly to whatever the situation is. So,
and that's about a what. It's not about the who. What ethnicity that you are or whatever. It's about here's the standards.
Absolutely.
There's the standards for everybody, and we want to reach out to make the community better in that way.
And we talked about the accreditation, and what a lot of that is putting the right policies and things in place. And what I'm listening to the news, I'm watching the news outlets, I'm watching the protest, and the issues that I'm hearing that people are protesting on and they're marching on are things that we put in place. As I said earlier, we started having this conversation years ago. We've put these procedures in place. Most of the agencies around here have done that. And so that we can, if you have solid policies and solid training, then you have that accountability, and the officers know what the expectations are. And they know if they step outside of that, and they know they're watching. We implemented some of the things that in the 21st century policing with the task force, with President Obama's task force, was, we responded to body cameras. We have body cameras. Mm-hmm. That has been a great tool, and I think it shows the story. Not always, you can't see everything. Right. It's a piece of technology, just like your cell phone. Sure. And I ask people all the time when they say, "Well, why didn't it work?" I say, "Well, you have a cell phone." It's technology, just like a cell phone. But most of the time, we see exactly what happens on there, and other people have videos. So technology has, in my opinion, helped us a lot. Some people think, well, that's really hurt law enforcement. It hasn't, because that helps us to see if the officer's done right. Now, we like to watch, everything and see the entire story if we can, and then we do a complete investigation. So I think all those practices that we put in place, and we've tried to follow those rules, everything from the body camera to policies, crisis intervention training, focusing on community events and programs and letting our community know us, and hiring diversity, all of those things I feel like is what's made, and again, I'm going to speak for Belmont, I feel like that's what has helped us to really connect to the community and to regain that trust. It's been lost in a lot of areas in law enforcement across the country. Right. Across the world.
Something that
around the world
I love to tell my kids in our congregation is that, love is unconditional. We're supposed to unconditionally love people. But trust is earned.
Absolutely.
And trust has to be mutually earned. I could lose my wife's trust that has been built over years with one terrible decision I made. Yeah. And she might trust me again. She might still love me, but she doesn't right then and there. And so I guess the key thing that I'm thinking about that could be helpful for everybody is that we all have to do our part to make sure that trust is engendered and that we're helpful to one another, instead of looking for, I got to get around the guy in blue or the lady in blue, because that's essentially just a way of saying I'm going to be selfish on my own way. Is there anything else that you want to I'm going to give you an open mic. Anything you want to say, or just say to the people that are out there for as long as you need to talk?
Well, first of all, again, I thank you for the opportunity to be here. Having an opportunity to just explain, because we're hurting as a country right now. We all hurt. Yes. And people think sometimes about law enforcement officers that we're just a badge and a uniform. I have a family I go home to. People who love me, and, so it breaks our heart when people view all of us. I've had people look right at me and say, I don't want to be around this white police officer, or I don't want to be around this racist murderer. And that's hurtful, because that is not who I am. Mm-hmm. That is not who we are. I've been in this business over 25, 26 years, right. And that's not who I am. Right. And so to be labeled as that is hurtful. And I just ask everyone, I don't judge people based on people who's wronged me. I base it on their character.
Yes, sir.
And that's what I would ask, just if I could just make one statement to everyone and try to get everyone to come together, is to say, judge us based on what we do, based on what our actions are, and don't just take our word for it. Right. We have a Citizens Police Academy. You're welcome to come in, see how we do business, look at our policies. We're very transparent, our use of forces, our numbers, all those things, because we want to be the best people we can be to serve our community. That's what we're here for. Yes, and sir. When and I don't, we have a lot of issues in America, but I think the biggest issue we have, Pastor Hardee, is a heart condition.
Amen.
That's what I think we have.
Absolutely.
And if you get your heart has to be right. It has to be, full of love. And I think that a lot of people, I think that's where they're at right now, but they're not expressing it the right way.
Right.
They're emotional. And I'm hoping this is going to allow us to sit down and have talks. And, I hear that sometimes, they say, well, I have people say, well, you haven't heard our voice. You haven't heard us. You haven't done anything to change it. And that's where I want to sit down and say, don't base that on what you're seeing. Bring it here and let me show you the things that's been asked for by American citizens. We've done it. We've put it in place.
Right.
We've got a long way to go. We've got a lot of work to do, but we've done a lot of work.
Right.
And we feel like we have people, especially here in Belmont, that has a heart to serve our citizens.
Yes, sir.
And so we would just like the opportunity to be trusted, to be loved. Let us love our community, and that, I think that's where it's at. Is we've really got to get to that. We obviously understand people are angry at law enforcement. We see it every day. We hear it. But we have a great supportive community here. Right. And I think that you talked about the march that we had last Sunday. People came out. We had a great event. We walked with the Unity March. We had great conversations. Did an interview with one of the organizers after it was over. We had some great dialogue, and that's what is important. When I look at Pastor Hardee, I don't see the pastors, if I can be a little personal.
Yes,
I don't see the pastors that I've arrested in my past for horrible acts. I see Pastor Hardee as a man that I know has a great reputation and has served our community well.
Thank you.
And that's what I ask of other people. We see so many people. We arrest and investigate so many people that are in positions of authority. But we do not judge that whole group of people by that.
Right.
And that's what I would ask for us is, judge us based on our actions and not just because, and I've been called this many times, the Blue Devil, from wearing the blue uniform. And that's That's horrible. So I just, base it on actions. And, if we're wrong, bring that to us and tell us.
We know in the Bible that angels are really messengers. Sometimes preachers are even called angels to churches. And so thank you for being an angel in our community. This is something I want to cover, just this very last question. It's something that's just popped up in my mind as we've been talking. So when a lot of people see you today, they see not Hawkins, they see Chauvin, whatever the officer's name is. So let's imagine, and I'm sure this is not imaginary for you, you've got officers that there's a short trigger or there's behavior that you notice is going to probably put them in danger and put other people in danger specifically because of the decisions that they make that can impact not only themselves but a whole nation, just like this misguided, whatever was going on with him was not right. So when you see those things happen with officers, if you family issues or whatever, what are some things that you do when you see that pressure about to boil inside of them to help to get them back on a good track so that they don't do something foolish?
So, constantly we do the training and we have conversations, and that is something about the health and wellness is our supervisors are constantly talked to about watch your officers. They have to be face-to-face with their officers every day. And that's not a luxury a lot of larger agencies, have. Mm-hmm. They may not be able to have that direct contact, but I feel like we've put the right leaders in place in Belmont. We've done a whole restructuring. And those leaders are watching those behaviors, and when they see, they have conversations. And what's even more encouraging is our employees feel comfortable coming to talk to our supervisors when they have personal issues in their life, because we all have issues. We all have things that need to be addressed so they don't boil over.
Right.
But that's something that we really talk about, and we have open conversations. And I often talk to our officers and say, we are all one mistake away from being homeless, unemployed, dead, in prison. We're all there.
Yes, sir.
It takes one incident for those things to happen. So let's have the conversation when you're angry about something or when something's truly troubling you, you have issues at home or whatever. Let's have those conversations.
Yes, sir.
And, you know, we even brought you on board to help have those conversations. And a lot of the officers, they have their own pastors and everything.
Right.
So we try to focus on, and that's part of the president's task force, was mental health and wellness of our officers.
Right. I think it's powerful, too, that you're continuing on the legacy of the policies that President Obama asked people as best practices. Certainly, I think that our current president would agree with those things. It's not about the who, it's about the what. Absolutely. We just wanted to do better and better as far as that's concerned. So today, as we close, I just want to thank you so much for the way that you serve, and thank you for the privilege of being able to interview you now. And we hope to have you back to do some more, even when things are not even as hot as they are now, about some Absolutely. Of the proactive things that you continue to do. But the final thing I would say today, I want to just put a commercial out there that our police department knows about here. Gaston County Police Departments know about it as well. Something that's begun during this crisis is we've begun a counseling outreach to people that need counseling. And it's literally this easy. It's a website that you would go to if you're anxious, if you're depressed, if you're having marital tension, if you're feeling addictions or you're whatever, suicidal. You can go to someonelistened, with a D, someonelistened.com, fill out a simple form, tell people you're struggling, and within 90 minutes, somebody's going to call you and say, we have some counselors that we can refer you to that can help you to walk through this issue, and you're not alone. So that's available to all of our citizens because of a combined effort of churches, community, the Community Foundation, various foundations, and the county commissioners of Gaston County. We want to be able to help you. So if you're struggling about anything, whether you wear blue or you got a grungy t-shirt on, whether you're male or female, black, white, Latino, whatever, go to someonelistened.com, fill out a very simple form, and somebody's going to be contacting you within 90 minutes because we want to help make a difference in your life too so that the emotional pot won't blow off and blow a lid. Thanks again, Chief, for being with us today. We'll shake hands, and then we're going to go wash them, sanitize them so that we make sure to stay appropriately following the rules. And thanks for serving our community. I want to pray for you and our team. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this community of Belmont, North Carolina, and Mount Holly, North Carolina, and those that are surrounding. We pray for Chief Hawkins and Chief Roper and all the others that do such a tremendous job trying to help be giving, not just taking, to be light, and to also police the darkness so that it doesn't hurt people. So, Father, we ask that you give them incredible wisdom. We ask that you would help them to exercise their power and authority with discretion. We ask that you would keep them from hurt, harm, and danger, and also keep them from inflicting hurt, harm, and danger that is not necessary to help make sure that that crime or that potential crime is handled appropriately. Thanks again, Father, for the opportunity to continue this conversation with yet another community leader, and we ask that you would receive all the praise and honor and glory. And then, Father, I pray finally for the ones that are out there that are struggling, that need to go to someonelistened.com, that you would help them to leap over the potential shame they might experience, because everybody needs help, including this one who's praying. But also, Lord, that now it's paid for. There are ways that we've been able to pay for people who are struggling. Please help us all to take advantage of those things so we can be well emotionally, spiritually, physically, in every way. In Jesus' name, amen. Thanks again, Chief. Now we got to wash this hand too.